G'day legends, so obviously we are all still coming down from the fallout in UFC 321, and in this video today we're going to be talking about why, no matter how badly we feel about the letdown that was the ending of the main event, Tom Aspinall getting poked in the eye by Cyril Gane, this is actually the best case scenario for the UFC. For the UFC, that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. This concept was brought up by one of the absolute legends on the live stream, Bruce Wayne. I'm sure he's out there somewhere right now, playboying it up, buying hotels. I don't think that Bruce Wayne gets up to anything else at night. But no, Bruce brought this up about how this could be the best outcome for the UFC. So shout out to him, and I'm going to pick apart his little theory here and actually dive more into it because it is quite good. Now, it all starts with this conversation, which I am sure you have heard before, but just to make sure that this video is nice and capped off, I'm going to bring it up now. So just have a little bit of patience. And it's this conversation that came up here. Andy Aspinall, Tom Aspinall's dad, coach, trainer, manager, was talking about how Tom Aspinall has only got 3 fights left on his contract, and then after that is done, it's time to pack up with the UFC and head over to boxing. Now, Tom has got 1 defense of his interim title against Curtis Blades. This would have been a 2nd defense against Cyril Gane. He could have gotten in 2 more defenses. His UFC contract would have been done and dusted. He would have gone down in the UFC record books as the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. At least this was the plan until the spite with Cyril Gane started to go awry and the first round looked a lot more competitive than it actually was. But do you see the storyline that the boys over in the Aspinall camp were going for? Now, this has always been a point of contention with Dana White, the UFC heavyweight champion, because he is one of the few gifted athletic heavyweights in the world. And even though the UFC heavyweight division shouldn't carry this much prestige, it simply does for some reason. Like ever since the days, back in the days, over in the Pride days and the Randy Couture days, the UFC heavyweight champion has always been looked upon as the baddest man in the world. And with that comes a little bit of negotiating power, especially when you consider just how much boxers are getting paid, at least the top echelon boxers, heavyweight boxers holding the world titles. What they get paid compared to what the UFC champion gets paid is just worlds apart. And Dana White has always hated this, and it's always caused a little bit of friction. Well, now that this fight has been ruled a no contest, that sort of puts like some brakes on Tom Aspinall's plans of being able to become the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time, right? Like, he now needs 3 fights left on his contract, and he's only got 2 fights left on his contract. This gives the UFC a tremendous amount of power, which I have talked about and praised a lot in the past, because quite frankly, for you and me, the fans, the power that the UFC has over its fighters is great for us. It's what keeps the divisions clean. It's why fighters are able to step in on short notice. The UFC being in control of its belt system so ruthlessly is what stops the mess that was the boxing world up until Turkshay Ali came into the boxing world and fixed it. And the UFC has a lot of control over that belt and how they want to handle it. You see, the UFC generally offer 3-fight contracts, 5-fight contracts, or 7-fight contracts. Now that Tom Aspinall has started off his run as the undisputed UFC champion, and before the fight was even fought, talking about how we're going to bounce and go and do boxing, now the UFC can sort of put some brakes on him a little bit here and really hold that belt back and say, well, before you continue to fight out your contract, we're going to need you to sign this 7-fight deal. Yeah? Now, Tom Aspinall doesn't have to sign that 7-fight deal, but if Tom Aspinall chooses not to fight that 7-fight deal, then the UFC can just simply choose not to book him for a fight. And when Dana White gets asked what's going on with Tom Aspinall, why isn't he fighting? Dana White can turn to the reporters and say, I don't know, the dude just doesn't want to take the fight. You know, Tom Aspinall's made a lot of money as the UFC champion of the world. He's got a lot of sponsorships. He's had a lot of eyes on him. He just doesn't want to take the fight. I can't force him to fight. That is, in a way, not technically lying. Like, Tom Aspinall will not sign the new contract to fight Cyril Gane. Then you can wait another 6 months and you could say, well, Tom Aspinall, we're just going to have to make an interim title. An interim title between Cyril Gane and Alexander Volkov. And that starts to pry the belt away from Tom Aspinall, putting pressure on him to re-sign the contract. Excuse me, I had to burp in the middle of a sentence. God damn. So that puts pressure on him to re-sign the contract, and we have seen all of this before. We have seen all of these tactics before. We just went through it during the Francis Ngannou situation. And Francis Ngannou had to wait until eventually his contract contract did sunset before he went over and started playing with partners over in the boxing world. However, I know that was only a couple of years ago, but things have changed very quickly in the last couple of years. A lot of subtle little changes that to the casual eye people might not have seen. But the boxing world, the market in which Tom Aspinall and Andy Aspinall think that they can just waltz into and start shopping themselves around in, is a completely different world to the one that Francis was shopping themselves around in. I want you to take your mind back to all the damage and mud that Dana White was throwing at Francis Ngannou during that time. And then once Francis Ngannou did leave and go into the free market, remember how many organizations were turning him down? Originally, the PFL turned him down. One Championship turned him down. Bellator turned him down. No boxers were putting their hands in the ring. Tyson Fury was saying that Francis Ngannou is a joke. Yep, these were the conversations that were going around back in the day, until Turkshay Ali came in and swung it around and started throwing cash all over the place like he's inviting Instagram models to come around to shit on them. And still he started throwing his cash around. That is when Francis Ngannou was able to actually lock down the deal, yeah? This was all the way back in 2023. Get out, I've made a quick chart to show you guys what I'm talking about. Back in 2023, PFL was being heavily invested in by Saudi Arabia. Francis Ngannou moved over there, signed with the PFL, but he also signed, for some reason, an open contract, which has gone great for the PFL, which has gone great for Francis, but horrible for the PFL, where he could go and do boxing as well and earn a ton of money. And you know what happens when fighters earn a ton of money? They don't really want to fight that often anymore, do they, PFL? A little bit of this, mate. But not only that was going on, the PFL was also, Francis was also being helped out by the Riyadh season of boxing. And this is when boxing really started to come to life, you know, late in 2017, 2016, all the way up until the early 2020s, getting up into 2023. There wasn't really this organized Rings magazine thing that there is going on now. There was just Turkshay Ali coming into boxing and finally fixing it and putting big money fights on. This is actually what got boxing moving. It was the injection of cash from Turkshay Ali, right? He came in and actually got the juices flowing in boxing. That was the world in 2023. Yeah, the world in 2025 of boxing is very, very different. Dana White has now entered the scene of boxing. And not only has Dana White entered the scene of boxing with the Ali Act, Dana White has pulled Turkshay away from funding the PFL. The Saudi investment fund hasn't really been going on that much in the PFL, and it's moved over towards the UFC and towards Zuffa boxing, right? So that is a completely different environment. In fact, this whole WEC boxing thing that has been going on has essentially evolved into Rings magazine boxing, which is going to be working with Zuffa boxing. The PFL, they're not looking to invest a lot anymore either. I've been covering this story a fair bit. Well, not a fair bit, but I did cover this story in the live streams. The PFL are suing 5 of their biggest sponsors because the checks have stopped coming. This is a real story you can go and check out. Yeah, the PFL is now on a downward trajectory. And the Saudi boxing fund is looking to take over all of boxing. So the Tyson Furies, the Anthony Joshuas, the Deontay Wilders, all of these guys, Golden Gloves Promotions, yeah, they are all sort of free agents within their own promotional companies. But all the big paydays are with Turk and Dana. Now, if Tom Aspinall tells the UFC to go screw themselves, draws them out into this ugly media battle where they're throwing mud at each other, yeah, Tom Aspinall might be able to sit it out and wait and get out of his contract when it sunsets, and by the time the title gets stripped off him because he's been inactive and, you know, they've had to make an interim title, and Dana White has been able to be in front of the press every single weekend, and the UFC have been able to be in front of the press every single weekend and just throw and hurl mud at Tom Aspinall for sitting out. That's totally fine. You know, that's what happened to Francis. But then when Francis entered the boxing world, no one wanted to pay for him. No one wanted to pay for him at first, except for Turk. Well, now Turk is with Dana. Dana can put in the good word to Turk, you know? That, yes, Turk is his own person. Dana can put in the good word to Turk, and they can start to blackball Tom on the other side, onto the sport that he's running into. And you might be thinking, well, Tom doesn't need to do anything with Turkshay Ali and Dana White and Rings magazine. You know, he could go out there and there's the Tyson Furies, there's the Usyks, these guys, there's Deontay Wilder. These guys are absolutely free agents. But these guys only make the big money fights when they work with Turk. Everyone's been working with Turk. The fights weren't happening before Turk came along. They need to play nice with Turk. Turk and Dana can blackball Tom Aspinall. So this idea of Andy Aspinall talking about how the boxers get paid more money. We're going to wrap up our 3-fight contract and we're going to disappear into boxing. Ballsy move, saying that out loud, especially when where you're trying to run into is being controlled by the same emperor of where you're trying to run away from. This is not what it was a couple of years ago. Things have drastically changed. And the one bit of leverage that Tom Aspinall might have had is this win streak that he had going on and setting himself up to be considered the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. That is now over, and he didn't even lose the fight, you know? Competitive first round, gave the first round to Cyril Gane, but he got eye-poked. That's a fight crossed off on the contract. There's only 2 fights left. Tom Aspinall needs 3. This is kind of the best case scenario for the UFC. Things just work out for the UFC all the time. There's a history of this in the UFC where they tend to get the best bounces imaginable when they need to, and I think it's because they stack the deck for success so much. It's very hard for them to get unlucky. They control the fighters, they control the drug testing, they control the media as much as they can. That is why they hate MMA YouTube. They control the narrative, they control the belt. You know, when you've got so many odds stacked in your favor, the dominoes are going to fall, the cards are going to flip towards your side as often as they possibly can. Things still go wrong for the UFC. Things still go wrong, you know. They didn't want Tony Ferguson to trip over the cable. Things still go wrong. Conor McGregor still snapped his leg. Things go wrong. You know, Merab kept winning. Belal kept winning. Magomed beat Alex Pereira. But generally, they've got so much set up the right way that things continue to just fall in their direction. And this one, the eye poke, has completely fallen in their direction. So well done, Bruce, for noticing that on the live stream. You are a bloody legend, Brucey boy. That's it. If this is your first time here, g'day, welcome. My name is Dougie. I make MMA content all the time. I go live all the time as well. If you enjoyed this video, you want to join us on the live stream, share. Oh my God, I'm losing the ability to talk at the end of this video. Bring it home, Dougie. Bring it home, mate. What was I saying? Oh, if you want to join me on the live stream, share some of your theories, comments, that kind of stuff. Jump in, hit that notification bell down there to know when I go live. Otherwise, just leave a comment down at the bottom of this video. Hit the like button as well. If you're one of the bloody legends of the channel, like Brucey Boy, your names are up on the next slide to say thank you so much for supporting the channel. And me and the live viewers do a great little picks game where we see who's the best picker out of the entire live community. And the top 10 leaderboard has been updated. That is up, that's on the end credits as well. That's it. I'm out of here. I need to go to work. Goodbye, guys. Have yourselves a great day wherever you are. I'll see you all next time. Bye.